Welcome to Cozy Reads Publishing, a podcast for the avid reader and exceptional writer. Tune in to hear exciting discussions about new authors, book launches, reviews, editing, and even readings from new books. So get cozy in your favorite reading nook and enjoy the show.
Hi, I'm S.J. Turner, author and owner of Cozy Reads Publishing, and joining me is a science fiction and fantasy author, Dorian Keys.
Hi, everybody. Hi, S.J. My name is Dorian Keys, and I write science fiction. At times, I write fantasy as well, yes.
Today, we're going to talk a little bit about what you've been up to and about your new book, right?
Yes. Recently, I picked the title, and the publisher was pretty happy about it.
Tickled, actually. So let's start from the beginning. Can you tell me what inspires your writing mostly?
So I have about three elements that I can recognize off the top of my head: audio, visual, and I mean you can lump this. I guess it's two: audio and visual. Sometimes when I read titles or maybe passages, when I read a book or an article or something like that ticks me, if you will. Many times I have generated scenes of a couple of sentences. As far as imagery, yeah, those are big for me. But the biggest one is audio, it's music. And it doesn't have to be songs sang by artists. It can be any soundbite. And just
instrumental?
It's not only instrumental. Sometimes it's the way a vehicle brakes sound. It's sound bites, really. Even within the songs that I generally send you, I would send you a timestamp of what is working for me and what's not. So, it's really like a small portion of a song too.
Okay. And so what's really your process when you're writing a story?
I generally start writing with a scene that is not necessarily in the beginning or the end. Perfect example for this, and I know I don't have any excerpts, I don't have anything to show because this work is not ready yet, but the sequel to Imprint Legacy literally starts the scene that came up that spawned the entire 85,000 so word book that I have in the second edit. It's in the middle of the book. That was a scene, and that scene was brought by a song.
So you just write around the entire original scene that you wrote?
So initially I wrote the actual scene, and then I wrote the continuation of it a little bit. And then I needed more information about the continuation, so I wrote in front of the scene. And then I continued, and then I needed more information based on what is going on. And then so I went back and forth, up until, I'm at 90,000 words now. And I'm pretty sure it's going to grow longer because my editor generally asks for more. As far as writing, as the first for me is the book that I'm currently writing for Cozy Reads. I wrote that book from beginning to end, and that is the first for me, because I generally do not write like that. I write off from a scene, and that scene gives me the entire feel of the story of the book.
So does that mean that you'll write like separate scenes and then later on patch them together, or you literally write one scene and then work around it?
I can't determine that. I would write a scene, and I have written a scene and then worked around it. And at times I have written scenes that are further down in the book, not necessarily at the end. And I have caught up with them. And that generally happens when I know where the story is going. And I'm not talking about plotting. I just have a general idea where it's heading. I would write a scene and then later on catch up with it. And at times that scene itself will change. But it would personally be like a landmark for me.
Have you ever found yourself so you've written the original scene and then you write around it and then you end up going back and taking out the original scene that started the whole story?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. In the story Iris in Morningstar, I started the scene and the continuation did not match the initial scene. So I continued writing the continuation, and the initial scene that spawned the story became obsolete. So I removed it, and Iris is what it is right now.
And I've read Iris. Iris is a really good story. So do you regret removing the original part, not continuing that at all?
No, not really. The original it's in the story Iris. It's a story of artificial intelligence technician. He writes the software for artificial intelligence, and its name, or her names as he calls her, is Iris. It runs itself. The original scene has that is removed. So this is like a Easter egg. The original scene that is removed has a software engineer coming back home after he's fired, and he's throwing a hissy fit at his home, and the artificial intelligence comes on screen and is asking him for more bodies, or so is asking him for something, and he doesn't understand what she's asking him about. And so he starts screaming at the screen, and his neighbor kind of knocks on his wall and says, "Hey, cut it down in there." So that scene is the obsolete scene. What the actual story ended up happening was he built the artificial intelligence after his father worked on it, and all of this is happening after an alien invasion of planet Earth. And Iris is now going to help humanity fight off this invasion.
Wow. Yeah, that's a huge change.
So that's that is a huge change, and that's one of the things that I don't think it's plotting. You could call it plotting, but I don't think I plot. The story after this developed organically. So
Yeah, I would think that that's quite the opposite of plotting, actually.
Yep.
So tell me, do you have a strict daily routine that you do for writing? Like, do you write strictly at, every night at 8 o'clock or?
No, I do not have a strict daily routine. I do write daily, one way or another, whether it's a scene, whether it's editing a little chapter that I have it in my head. At any given time, I have more than one script in my head. And that actually helps me with, if I reach the end of one story or storyline or scene in one book, and I'm not moving forward at the pace that I want to, I actually move on to the next story, and so I use that as part of my routine to write. So I can do something relating to writing every day, whether it's a little research, writing on one story, writing on the next story, writing on the third story, a little bit every day.
And that prevents writer block for you?
For me, I mean, yes, it does. It does.
So that's really good for other authors to know, right?
That would be. Go ahead.
No, I want you to answer that. That's a good thing for them to know. That's something that they can utilize.
I'm pretty sure that seasoned authors, and from what I've seen from interviews and from other from like written or video interviews, I've seen more authors that have a lot of works, either whether they have like a lot of drafts, outlines, or plotted stories, whichever way they do it, they have multiple works at the same time. And what I do is what I just said. If I hit a stop on a scene and it's not progressing as fast as I would want it to, I would move on to the next one, and which is not necessarily, but it is a different story and it's a different setting. So, my head goes away from there. And recently I saw an interview with James Patterson, and he had like a huge drawer full of outlines and plot lines, and I believe that's how he does it. Just moves on to the next one, but that's just speculation, really.
And I know I have a couple that are on the go, but I find it kind of difficult to bounce back and forth myself. But maybe I'm the oddity. Maybe you're right. Maybe that is how most do it.
I always say like what I am doing it, and I have several views that I thought that happens to everybody. What I generally try to do that I can still do it. I try to hold whatever stories I'm actively writing in my head, so I can easily retrieve them. One thing that I now have, the sequel to Imprint Legacy, as I mentioned, is 85,000 words long. It takes me a couple of days to get in that script to refresh me what's going on, in order for me to continue, edit, or do anything. Right? So on a large script like that, I can't hold that in my head. I have to let it go so I can occupy my head with something else. So if I'm working on a large script like that, yeah. And especially if it's like the second edit, that so many changes have happened since the first draft, and I can't
retain it.
I can't. I would try to. Sometimes when I'm actively writing about it, I would be able to retain it, but when I stop writing about it for a couple of days or maybe a week, I would lose it. I have to read again.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about Imprint Legacy? How you came up with the idea, that kind of thing.
Imprint Legacy is my first debut novella, right?
Mm-hmm.
In my head is a short story because that's how the story came to be. I had submitted that as a short story in Asimov magazine, and that was 2015, I believe, or 2016. And what ended up happening was they held the story for about a year. It was a short story. Again, in my head, it's still a short story. It was a 10,000 word story.
Right.
And
you've expanded on that since, right?
Right. So after they rejected it, I contacted an editor, which I'm still working to this day with her. At this point she writes books for Marvel. She's an amazing author and editor, and she helped me with it. At my request, we kept Imprint Legacy short. That's how Imprint Legacy came to be.
Okay, and you self-published Imprint Legacy.
I did. I tried submitting it to at least one publishing house, and with the forums that they use, and I have about 3 or 4 rejections. And I know, these things don't happen overnight, but I really didn't want to wait, so I self-published.
Right, and it's done well, right? You've also had it translated.
Imprint Legacy is translated and published in Albania by Toena Publishing House. Yes.
Right. Yeah. So that's quite a success.
And so you could say that book is hybridly published. Yes, correct.
Right.
At this point, I'm told that it's in libraries, so I don't really know how much it's like what's happening with that book on that side, but it is published elsewhere.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So with Imprint Legacy and Morningstar, I know that they're science fiction. And in Morningstar, you had written other genres. Do you want to talk about those?
I have. I generally in my head, the genre of science fiction and fantasy, especially fantasy, is pretty broad, right? It's a pretty broad genre. Anything that doesn't generally happen in real life. In my head, it kind of falls into fantasy. A couple of stories that I've written in Morningstar don't fall into that category. You are correct. Ellie is a horror story. It's a story about a girl. So it's Ellie's story. I'm having a hard time putting it into words now. Ellie's story is a story about a girl who is hearing voices and has had trouble focusing in school. And she goes to doctors, and doctors give her pain medication. And she finally confesses, and she goes to a psychologist. And her psychologist puts her under hypnosis. And it turns out that there's something more sinister that's happening with Ellie. She's not sick. Something else.
Haunted?
Something else is happening to Ellie, and it turns out. This story turns out to be Ellie. Right, Ellie is haunted. It's haunted by a demon who's I'd say in her head, but it's not really in her head. But it really is, but it's not. So it's that Ellie is a horror story, and it's generally I don't write them, but the story came to my head, and I wrote it. I think I remember telling you when the scene. I think the interview with the psychologist was the first scene that actually came to my head.
Right.
So, and I wrote around that scene.
And Ellie's actually a very good story. Yeah, I like it personally. It's one of my favorites out of the entire Morningstar book.
So that's Ellie. It falls out of step with my general writing, and Fuses, I believe, as well falls out of step. Fuses is fantasy and science fiction because it is what I call a diesel punk. It's not really steampunk because it's moving from steampunk to diesel punk, and I don't generally write like that either. So those two stories kind of fall out of step in that book.
Right. Now, if you had a favorite character out of one of your books, could you name just one character out of any one of your books that you would classify as your favorite?
There is one character that personally I'm much closer to than the others, and as ask any author, and they would say that they like all their characters, but one has a different meaning than all the other characters. While I came up with the other characters, Zelsier in Imprint Legacy, my debut novella, is much closer to me. And as I said, when I have been told by a very well-known author that when you write and publish a book, and the book is out in the wild, as we say, when a reader picks up the book, it's up to the reader to form an opinion about it. And they might not necessarily read what you wrote. They read what they want to read. So the book takes a life of its own. That's undoubtedly true. What inspired Zelsier was a picture that my mother sent me. It was a picture of me and my wedding day, and my grandfather on his wedding day. And there's maybe 8 decades that separate us, and we looked exactly the same. If one would make my picture black and white.
Wow.
And you could say that the entire book was spawned, like the entire idea was spawned by that picture in a way, and I would say that's the point. That would be correct. But readers have read something else. So I would say that in that aspect, Zelsier is a character that is a little closer to me. And it's not even a main character now.
All right. Now, if you could make any changes to any one of your books, what would it be, and why?
Going back to Imprint Legacy, all reviews that I have received complained that it was too short, and the story was innovative enough, but the book itself was too short.
That's
And
not a
so
bad review.
right, so I would make it a little longer, but in my defense, it was also my first book, so I would ask the reader to please bear with me. I will fix that problem. These things do take a little time, but I promise you, the continuation, the sequel, the continuation of that story is much longer, much bigger, a lot more character, a lot more developed, a lot more descriptions, and everything else. So I would make Imprint Legacy maybe a little longer, maybe reformat it because it's still formatted the same way that I did it in 2019. As far as Morningstar, maybe edit, but that's about it. I don't think I have received many complaints as far as storylines.
Great. And what do you love most about writing?
Nothing. I don't like anything about writing. The finished product. What I like about writing is reading the finished product, and maybe the small dopamine hit that I get when I connect a scene, if that's what happens, because I don't only always write like that, but that's about it. Everything else about writing is not easy. Whether it's deadlines or holding multiple scripts in my head so I can continue working the machine, where I can write, where I can't write, stuff like that. It becomes a little tedious.
Okay. All right. I can live with that. I mean, I always smile when I think of your answer to that question, but
Why would you?
I mean, I get that, writing can be frustrating at times, and especially with the idea you're juggling times and deadlines. I know that you really not a fan of deadlines, but I mean, the overall idea that you've published 2 successful books, you're doing well, and writing, I think personally, from what I can see of you, comes so easily to you that I can't see that it should. I would think that would be one of the best things that you would enjoy about writing.
I mean,
The creativity, I mean, that should be a mental release in itself.
don't get me wrong. I don't hate writing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't dread writing. You know how I always say that I can tell whether I'm writing a good book or not. The reader has to tell that.
Right.
So I mean, you could say that all authors, they do have that symptom that you're writing a work and you don't exactly know if it's gonna be a good book or a bad book, or if it's going to be accepted or rejected, or even when you submit it, if it's gonna do well or not.
Okay. Yeah, that's true. That's true.
But as far as me, it's mostly time. As far as my thing goes, it's mostly time.
Are you thinking that that's like a lack of confidence, self-confidence in your writing?
What do you mean when I say that I can't judge my own books?
No, when you're saying, you're thinking about when you're submitting it and how the reader's going to receive it. Is that
I would say that again, certain notions of mine have changed over time, right? From when we first had this conversation 2 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
I thought that everybody did it this way, right? That wrote like I wrote, and I wasn't doing anything out of the ordinary. Now
Right.
I can see that it's not many do it this way. And it's not necessarily the right way. It's not
It's not
necessarily
necessarily
the wrong
way.
It's a way, and I thought that everybody did it this way. As I said, I believe all authors. I believe that all authors would have that self-doubt, whether you're writing a new work, are people going to like it or not. I don't think that's irrational thoughts to have.
No, I mean, but the thing that I think every author needs to remember is that you'll never please everybody. I mean, you're never going to hit 100% of the audience all the time. It's impossible. It's absolutely impossible. And not
Right?
everybody's
No.
going to read the same thing.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. No author hits all audiences. That's why we have different genres. You're absolutely right about that.
Yeah. And I mean, there's a reader for every author, no matter what. So I think every author needs to remember that when they're writing, especially when they start hitting that wall of self-doubt. Oh my goodness. This cold is getting to me. I'm sorry.
Then again, what do I like about writing? It's that's a few. I like a few things. The finished product, obviously. When I press publish, or when I send it to the publisher and it's out of my hands, that's a release, I would say. But the entire process, has been 6 months, 9 months. It's
So I know you're a busy author. But you did mention that you read, right? How often do you read?
I read. Well, I just like everybody else. I read daily. I had my own thoughts about this. I read every day, whether it's an article, whether it's a book. I read every. I have one of the books that I picked up now is I am rereading a book that I read when I was a child. The Fantastic Adventures of the Baron of Münchhausen by Rudolf Rasp.
That's a mouthful.
That's a mouthful. Yeah, that is a long that is a long title, but I did remember it. It stuck with me since 30 odd years, over 30 odd years.
Wow. And do you typically read the genre that you write, or do you just read anything?
I do have a preference. If I'm interested in a topic, for whatever the topic is, I would read books that are out of my genre. I believe it comes back to like preference. What do you want to do versus what do you have to do?
Right.
But I would generally just stay. I enjoy science fiction. I enjoy fantasy, and I enjoy these storylines. So that's what draws me to them. That fantastic element.
So that's your typical read.
I would say that, yes.
All right. I know that you've been working on a book right now that should be coming up in the early 2022. And you just came out with the title, right? Do you want to tell us the title?
Yes, I have. I'm working with Cozy Reads Publishing in releasing science fiction dystopia novel, and called The Logical Conclusion of a Captive Mind.
Great title.
A mouthful too.
Still really fitting. How did you come about choosing the title?
As of right now, I have completed first draft, and I have enough material and concepts in the book to have title. I believe that title should reflect what's inside the book. So, as being that I have a first draft, I do believe that I have enough material to come up with a title. The logical conclusion is a concept that is in the book, and Captive Mind is alluded in the book. It's not a concept. It's not explicitly said in the book.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about what the book is all about?
As of right now, the first draft. This is a story about one man that has lived in 3 different worlds, and they are 3 different worlds at this point. He was born on planet Earth, and when he was a child, the political situation and coupled with some other elements that are in the book caused his family to flee Earth and move to Mars, which by this time was terraformed. Roughly the same problems caused him to finally by himself move to the third colony, where he was forced to make certain decisions based on events that happened throughout his journey.
Okay. And did you find yourself having to do an awful lot of research for this book?
I did. I reread a couple of books, for sure. I did do some research in terms of the different types of robots that exist and the terminology that it's used based on what they have. I watched a couple of movies. I am still, working on different concepts as far as, cosmetics. The story as of this point, the story is done. So all that is left is what the main character and the world aesthetically would look around, and that there goes a little bit of research and a little bit of working my imagination on coming up with concepts that are not touched upon by other works.
Well, I think you're doing a fantastic job, Dorian. And I guess that's about our time for today. So I'd like to thank you very much for joining us and sharing the details of your writing process. And we'll definitely keep our eyes open for your new release or upcoming release, The Logical Conclusion of a Captive Mind.
Thanks for having me, SJ. And we'll hope that we have more interviews like this, hopefully adding more topics.
Absolutely. I look forward to it.
That's our show, folks. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. And be sure to visit cozyreadspublishing.com to discover the next best-selling authors. Are you interested in becoming a beta reader? Visit our website to learn more about how you can read the next bestseller before it hits the shelf. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.